Good morning. Bonjour. Thank you for answering back. I like that. Welcome to the final day of Evidence 2025. I hope everyone is doing well, that you were able to rest and eat, network, and learn a lot of things. So, yesterday, we continued our journey through a series of sessions and trainings that deepened our collective reflection on evidence use and collaboration across Africa. Together, we explored regional evidentiary processes and how knowledge travels across scales, the art and science of promoting evidence-informed decision-making with the launch of the Global Living Evidence Map, capacity building, and the importance of strengthening skills and systems for evidence-informed decision-making, gender and youth data through practical training on collection, analysis, and integration in policy and practice, innovative approaches to applying evidence across different contexts, youth employment, and country case studies from diverse sectors showing how experience and learning come together. And finally, a bold discussion on knowledge translation with the session Kill the Policy Brief, which invited us to think differently about how evidence is shared and used. Today, as we begin the final day of Evidence 2025, we will continue to build on these insights, exploring how to make evidence more inclusive, equitable, and reflective of the realities of all people. Our first session of the day is titled Valuing Evidence Differently, the Intersection of Gender, Youth, and Equity. To guide this important conversation, we have the pleasure of welcoming Andile Madonsela. Andile is the Director of Innovation and Equity at the Pan-African Collective for Evidence. She works at the intersection of research, innovation, and technology, leading initiatives that make evidence more accessible, relatable, and impactful for decision makers across Africa. With a focus on equity, gender, and inclusion, Andile has trained government officials, led multi-country research teams, and helped design groundbreaking tools such as evidence maps and rapid reviews that humanize data and center marginalized voice. Please join me in welcoming Andile Madonsela under your warm applause.
Thank you so much for that very beautiful introduction. We're on the last day of the conference. Are we excited? We're almost there. Oh, we said that it's over. Okay. I am going to try and speak slow. Good morning, everyone. And I'd like to welcome you to this session that is focused on how we begin to value evidence differently. So it has a couple of main focuses. The first one being on the Youth Charter that we sort of created together with the young people on Monday. Whilst everyone else came here on Tuesday, young people gathered on Monday, and we collectively defined a youth charter for young people within EIDM. So that is what we'll share. And then secondly, my very good colleague Violet will come through and she'll share about her own efforts in incorporating gender into the work that we do. And then my very good friend Lesedi will also come through and share with us how we begin to incorporate research by young people. And I'll also share some of our efforts in ensuring that we assess the extent to which evidence is sensitive to gender and equity rights. So this session really centers around the importance of being sensitive to gender and equity in the process of EIDM. But also, I think in addition there is also how we incorporate youth voices. Right, so to kick us off, I'm going to then call on my colleague. I'm not sure which colleague I'm calling, but I'm assuming I'm going to call my colleague Lutfia, who's going to take us through the Youth Charter. Can you please clear up hands for her as she comes on stage? Speak slow.
This is sliding. It's locked. Can you ask this lady to unlock it? Good morning. The energy is low. Good morning. We made it to the last day of Evidence 2025 in Benin, Cotonou. It's my honor and privilege to present the Youth Charter of the African Evidence Network Youth. And I think, this is, I said to Andile on Monday that this is a moment in history. It's a moment where youth are defining the space of EIDM. So I am Lutfia Dean, and it is my honor and privilege to present this to you. So, the AEN Youth Charter purpose. We young people from the Africa Evidence Youth League, Youth Impact Associates, youth from Latin American and Caribbean Evidence Hub, youth from the Evidence Synthesis Infrastructure Collaborative, known as our vision. We envision a future where young people are at the center of evidence-informed decision-making, co-leading how evidence shapes policy and decision-making, innovating within the EIDM space, and representing their communities across all areas of knowledge, creating impact for future generations and paving the way for those to come. Our youth values. Firstly, diversity and inclusion. The AEN Youth Charter actively seeks to ensure that the youth in the EIDM space are from diverse backgrounds, including different countries, languages, cultures, genders, regions, religions, educational backgrounds, sectors, areas of work, and levels of experience. There is recognition for the inclusion of specific marginalized groups, such as persons with disabilities, the LGBTQIA+ communities, and additional marginalized communities. Secondly, accountability and integrity, leading from the front, ensuring commitment and action. Innovation. We seek to pioneer groundbreaking approaches by advocating for the use of evidence in decision-making, contributing to the fight against poverty and inequality. Fourthly, collaboration. We prioritize inclusive collaboration and co-creation in the EIDM space. Fifthly, unity and solidarity, recognizing that only together can EIDM become a reality. And finally, being teachable. The youth and young people believe that we value continuity, and we are eager to learn from those who came before us, and we also offer new and innovative ways of doing things, which are different from the current status quo. Now, an important one, youth commitments and actions. We seek to break silos by co-creating and working in partnership within the EIDM space. Secondly, generating evidence, ensuring that evidence is generated about the issues that the AEN youth feel strongly about. Thirdly, inspiring the next generation, paving a path for future EIDM leaders. Funding. The AEN youth will work towards ensuring resource mobilization within the EIDM space. Engagement. We seek to contribute to ongoing discussions in the EIDM space. And finally, our last commitment and action would be networking. Exploring networking opportunities to develop partnerships and growth. Now, it's easy to commit, but what are we asking for and what is the support we need as young people? Resources, in terms of financial resources, access to technology, and important EIDM information. Secondly, representation and inclusion, to become leaders in the EIDM space, to sit at those tables. Finally, opportunities, ensuring capacity development, networking, collaboration, mentorship, and space to take up initiative. Recognition. The youth would like awards in the EIDM space. And lastly, dedicated spaces. Spaces where young people can set the agenda. This is a mouthful, but the youth are ready to take it up and hold that baton in the EIDM space. And we are entrusting the youth chair, Penka for now, who we trust very much within the AEN, to ensure that all the above are taken forward. And the youth will be supporting her in this journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lutfia, for sharing the Youth Charter with us. Like she said, we are entrusting the newly elected Youth Chair of the AEN to really take those definitions forward. Without wasting more time, I'd like to call upon my colleagues, Violet and Lesedi, to come on stage as we continue with our conversation. Thank you so much. Can you check if that mic works, maybe? Okay, that's fine. Oh, we're good. Okay, great. Since we are starting off this conversation, I think it's quite good that we maybe start with introductions, because we didn't read your very beautiful bios. So maybe, Violet, you can get us started with just who you are, the work that you do, and sort of your initial views on the topic at hand.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. It's day 3, so I'm sure people are very tired, but thank you for making the time. So I'm Violet Murunga. I am a senior research and policy analyst at the African Institute for Development Policy. I lead various projects that aim to bridge the gaps between research policy and action, working with governments to strengthen their capacity in evidence-informed decision-making, to nurture them as champions of evidence-informed policy-making within themselves and also within their institutions. I don't know, I don't want to say too much more in the interest of time, but you can read more about me elsewhere.
Thank you so much, Violet. Lesedi, can you please introduce yourself as well?
Thank you very much, Andile. I'll try to speak slow. I guess us South Africans, we've got the tendency of speaking very fast. So today, for the first time, I'll try to speak slow. Okay, my name is Lesedi Matlala, and I'm based in South Africa. I'm also a lecturer at the University of Johannesburg, where I teach monitoring and evaluation, but I also teach about governance and issues that is to do with evidence-based decision-making or evidence-based policy-making. So yeah, I've been in a space for about 5 years now, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm passionate about youth and I'm passionate about the evidence that they generate themselves. And then that's why I'm also a member of a lot of youth-based organizations in the country and even in the continent. But also I'm a proud member of the Africa Evidence Youth League, which I'm wearing the t-shirt, and I think I'm the only one in the room. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights. So how this session is going to work is that we're going to give very brief reflections and then we will give it to you to also have reflections with your neighbor. Right, so we are just going to inspire some of the discussions that you can have, and then we're going to have those discussions, and then I'm going to take you through the program, and then we're going to break. Right, so maybe Violet, you can get us started. I know you have slides, so maybe can we have her slides up, and she can get started on her reflections.
Thank you, Andile. So I'll try to go really quickly. That's the title of the session, not of my presentation. My presentation will focus more on insights that we have generated from projects that focus on integration of gender in evidence-informed decision-making processes. So I'll be drawing specifically from two projects. There is one project that we implemented between November 2023 and May 2025. That project was more of an assessment looking at gender data across Africa, utilizing a qualitative study design, desk review at regional level, and some few case studies, country case studies, and then in-depth work in two countries, Ethiopia and Senegal, and that involved desk reviews and interviews as well. And that particular piece of work privileged data from government systems, although we did talk to stakeholders who are non-state actors like civil society organizations, researchers, and others in between who generate knowledge, who use knowledge for various purposes. And we were specifically talking to groups that work, national statistics offices, gender ministries, health, education, planning, agriculture, and labor as well. And that piece of work was supported by the Gates Foundation. The other piece of work I'm going to draw on, although to a very small extent in comparison to the other, is the Learning Together to Advance Evidence and Equity in Policy Making to achieve the SDGs. And this was more of an implementation project where we are mainly strengthening capacity of policymakers, of researchers in Africa. And I think I talked a little bit more about this a few days ago, so I don't want to go into too much. It was focusing on reproductive health and clean energy as issue areas, and Nigeria and Kenya where we were doing in-depth work and then working through a network to reach out to other mainly researchers, but also some policy makers outside of Kenya and Nigeria. Next slide, please. So the background is that we have the SDGs, and there's that very strong focus on leaving no one behind. But of course, we know that we are getting to 2030, and a lot of the SDGs remain off track in terms of achieving them in Africa, but also in other regions of the world. So there's a document called the Gender Data Outlook that assesses where countries are in terms of data, gender data specifically. We know that to achieve the SDGs, the leaving no one behind, we need data that can be able to support us to make decisions that would help us be able to develop programs that would help us address the issues and then be able to achieve those SDGs. The Gender Data Outlook shows that Africa is, in terms of gender data capacity, we're kind of halfway through in terms of it rates where countries are, and it aggregates that at the regional level and finds that we have achieved half the potential we need on gender data. And there is, of course, variations at country level. You find that there are some certain countries that are doing well, with Kenya actually leading, but there are a few other countries like Rwanda, Uganda, South Africa that are doing a little bit better than even the global average. We need to address the 48% gap in data capacity issues, and therefore this the piece of work that we're doing in understanding what the issues are, but also working to strengthen the situation becomes very important. So, drawing from the gender data assessment, next slide. Gender data here, we're looking at it as broad, yeah? Not just statistics and quantitative information, because people can get confused with the data word, but it's broader. It's even research information from other sources. And it's quantitative, qualitative. It is data that is disaggregated in many ways beyond sex. It is data that is looking at how groups are affected differently by issues. So the lived experiences, that kind of data. When I talk about demand generation, that's production. Translation is the whole phase of analyzing data, then presenting it in certain ways and disseminating it. So that's what translation means here. And use, of course, is application of that information in policies, programs, resource allocation. And structures, mechanisms, and processes are things like having infrastructure for where you store, you make the data accessible. It is departments that that has individuals that are able to produce this data, analyze it, disseminate it, present it. Next slide. And I think I tried to clarify that because sometimes when I've done this presentation, people get lost in the translation terminology and what that means. So basically, it's analysis, presentation, sharing, synthesis, all those aspects beyond the production, before then the use. So getting into what this gender data assessment showed us is that there's growing demand for gender data. There's increasing efforts to produce gender data. However, there's little translation going on. A lot of it, the investment or the work is on the production side. When it comes to the translation part of it and the use, there's less progress there, and the use is affected also by the translation. And then there are some cross-cutting issues to do with regulation and laws and policies, funding, stakeholder coordination, capacity, and institutional norms and practices. So in terms of gender data, it is things, commitments like the SDGs have been very instrumental in bringing to light the need to focus on producing gender data. Gender data here is beyond sex disaggregation, intersectionality. So just making that point again. And of course, the SDGs has 17 goals, 169 targets, 232 indicators, of which 52 are gender specific or gender related. But something interesting to note is that at country level, countries actually localize the SDGs to their context. So they may not have all of the indicators that are there. They may then contextualize those that fit within their context. I'll just go to conceptualization of gender also being very critical in shaping demand. So there's the high-level commitment, but there's also at country level how gender is conceptualized. In Africa, it is mainly binary. Non-binary concepts are not yet accepted widely. Also, we found that at institutional, not designed for statistical purposes, but mostly just for tracking services. So there hasn't been really a big focus on putting quality checks for that data to then move from, being this data that monitors what is being provided as services to data that can actually be analyzed and changed into statistics, which would put less burden in having to do the very expensive big surveys, and you would have continuous data that you can do longitudinal kind of tracking with. But it's not being used because of all those quality issues that are embedded within it, and which of course are also driven by the issue of not utilizing technology to a great extent in generating that information. Next. Funding, of course, is a big one, so I won't talk too much about it. Very little goes to production of gender data, and then and its translation, and more on production rather than the translation component of it. And I think we've talked about this in some sessions as well. Stakeholder coordination and partnerships and collaboration, which is very important. And I know there was somebody who talked about youth earlier. This is where youth would fit in as well, ensuring that the insights that come in terms of what priorities are needed for production of gender data, bringing in the youth perspectives there so that the data that is produced also take into account those perspectives. Also, the low stakeholder coordination collaboration is important for that. What needs to improve? Legal environment. I think I've mentioned a few things there. I've noted there, like for instance, in Kenya, they actually have a process where they can do quality checks of citizen-generated data to just ensure that it is of a quality that they can use at that level for decision making, right? Given that, to address those trust issues. The trust issues are usually around quality when it comes to the government side. On the CSO side, sometimes it's about other things, like thinking the government is going to be, not very, how do I say, truthful with the data they produce. Capacity of data producers, knowledge brokers, and intermediaries to produce, to translate, and also to use gender data is important. Raising awareness so that people don't have a narrow perspective of gender, because that narrow perspective of thinking gender is only about women, gender is, about violence against, certain issues, is also what leads to a very limited focus on gender. So awareness becomes important to broaden people's perspective of what gender is. Coordination, partnerships, collaboration, of course, is key. I noted earlier, data systems and tools being automated, using technology, making them interoperable, analyzing, synthesizing, and packaging existing evidence. There's a lot of existing gender data we found in government systems, but these are not being accessed and analyzed because of problems accessing them, number one, in those databases that government has, and then just demand issues. Funding, of course, is big, over-reliance on donor funding or development funding, and government not putting as much, although there are some exceptions, like Benin actually, primarily the gender data is funded by government, but in most cases, it is funded externally, and externally also those budgets are always very minimal. And then just noting there's a lot of work going on to build the gender data on the continent and beyond, and they just need to be leveraged. And they're part of the reason why we have seen quite a big improvement in the gender data environment. Yeah, so just one more insight from one project, just noting that it really basically reinforced what we saw in the other assessment, but this was more of a intervention project. Next slide. Just reinforcing that we found that gender data, there's a narrow understanding, but our capacity development work within this project, you could see the change in people's perspectives as we went through the trainings that we were doing, just discussions we were having when we are working with them to look at some of their data. It was good to see that they had aha moments when we talked about what gender really is, beyond what they think it is. But of course, culture, how gender is conceptualized at the country level will always be a big influence of how then they move forward to what gender data they look at and use. And that's just something that you have to keep just, it's a long-term issue to change how people want to view gender as a concept. Yeah, so I think I'll just stop there for now. And just note that we were working also with the Ministry of Health and Energy, and it was good to see that gender is such a big topic in the energy space. It is just more of operationalizing it beyond the policy formulation stage to how you design programs to really ensure that you are responsive to the issues women face, issues men face, issues young people face. The operationalization, and it's not just in the energy sector, I think it's across sectors. I think countries are very good at highlighting the problems with a gender lens, but then operationalizing it at program level is where the challenge then is. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those very interesting findings on the gender data, Violet. So in the interest of time, I'll also share my quick reflections, and then Lesedi will come through, and then we'll give you the opportunity to have the discussions in the groups. So from my side, really, I'd like to share some of our experience in terms of ensuring that we center gender and equity in the work that we do. So if we go back, I think the idea of evidence-informed decision-making is that you use the best available evidence in order to implement more effective policies and interventions, right? But those interventions are likely to affect the most marginalized in our societies more compared to others, of course. So it's therefore important that those policies and interventions are sensitive to the needs of those who are most marginalized in our societies. So I think for us, there are three areas where we think that within the EIDM space, we have to be sensitive to gender and equity. And that firstly is the methods that are followed. So the methods that are followed in the research that we use should be sensitive to gender and equity. And then secondly, in the process of translating evidence as well, we should not lose sensitivity to gender and equity as well. And then the last process is sort of like the decision-making process. So we should not lose the idea or the value of being sensitive to gender and equity in the, in this process. So whether you are doing the research, primary research, so the methods should be sensitive, the translations should be sensitive, but also the decision making as well. If we lose it at any stage in this process, then we've lost it. But then we have made efforts to ensure that we assess the extent to which evidence is sensitive to gender and equity. First of all, we used international tools, such as the tool that was developed by the 3IE to look at different aspects of the methods that were followed, and also maybe the sampling as well, who was sampled, and what is also the focus of that specific research. But then secondly, we have also incorporated these elements when we are doing our evidence base. So at PACE, we produce evidence bases based on a variety of sectors and topics as well. So when we produce these evidence bases, we have what we call JC focus, which is gender equity and social inclusion. And what we do is that now we rate studies based on whether they are sensitive to JC, they consider JC, or they are JC absent. So this means that we, so if it's a study is JC sensitive, it means that it's specifically targets the most marginalized in society. So if you think about displaced individuals or individuals that are in informal spaces, right? And JC considered is when maybe a study does not particularly sample a marginalized group, but considers that the marginalized group might be differently affected by that specific intervention, for example. So if you give people cash transfers, it recognizes that women and men might be, sort of be affected differently by that specific intervention. And then the last one is JC absent. This is when the study does not particularly sort of sample marginalized people, but also it does not consider how the intervention or whatever topic is discussed affects the different people in that space. But what we've also done is that we have also engaged with South African definitions of what transformation is. So because we work very closely with our government partners in producing what we call policy relevant evidence maps. So we ensure that those evidence bases that we produce for our government counterparts also have that element, but also we sort of adopt their definition of what transformation is. So we use their policies, existing policies of what transformation means. So it covers aspects such as, of course, race, and other very important aspects as well. So I think our found over the years is that this work is very important and needed, and it is also valued by our government counterparts. So those are some of the things that we have done to ensure that we center gender and equity in this space. So now I'll hand over to you, Lesedi, to reflect on young people and research that is produced by young people and what you have found in that space and your reflections there. Okay, sure.
Okay, I thought perhaps maybe I should stand up since I'm still a youth. Might not have this opportunity in future to stand up like this. So I thought maybe let me utilize it while there's still time. So thank you very much, Andile. So I'm going to talk to you about the use of evidence produced by youth or youth-based organization or youth-led organizations. But let me start by saying that, you know, when young people are fed up or sick and tired of what is happening in their respective countries, most especially by their governments, normally they take it to the streets. And then when they take it to the streets, they are being told that no, this is not the right way. You guys should engage in formal processes where you guys can debate these issues and raise your frustrations there and have policies briefs out of those formal processes. But now the question I would like to put here in this room is that the same evidence that is produced in those processes, is it really used by policymakers or maybe is it considered as legitimate evidence by the governments themselves? I'm talking about the evidence that youth themselves produced. So where I'm coming with this is because, like, now in South Africa, we are about to host G20 summit. And what the South African did, they had something called G20 Youth Summit as well, where they invited young people to also come and participate, but in this case, as young, and they created a platform for them. But I had a chat with a friend of mine, which is not here, Dr. Zavako is not here. We had a chat about, so this is not the first time, you know, we have some of these processes where they invite youth to come and participate or produce some sort of evidence or policy briefs or whatsoever in these processes. But the question is, do those things really influence policy-making processes? Like, or do those things are just being done as a tick box? And then what we did, because we are both researchers, so we decided to say, okay, maybe let's look back at the type of these processes where they invite youth to have a voice in these issues, whether did they really have influence, or that was just for sake of compliance, or to say that so that they can sound good and say, we consulted youth, you know. So we went back, but also we also wanted to talk with young people themselves, more especially those youth-led organizations around the continent. So we had the pleasure of talking to guys from Kenya, Tanzania, and Nigeria as well, to ask them the same questions about, of course, the types of evidence that they are producing themselves, and to see whether that evidence really influence policy-making processes in their respective country, or is one of those things where we just crack our minds as young people trying to come with solutions that are actually affecting us, and the next thing, those things are just being thrown away. Now, that's where we take it to the street. But let me talk about the things that we found. We found that, of course, youth league organizations, most of them are being invited in a number of occasions or meetings. But however, their evidence and recommendation rarely shape the final decisions of those processes, because we find out that most of the evidence that policymakers will utilize are coming from those traditional research institutions or so-called think tanks, other than those ones that are being produced by the youth themselves. But then we wanted to understand, okay, maybe what type of evidence do youth-based organizations themselves produce? It's quite a lot. Most of the research or evidence that they produce is from participatory research and surveys where they capture live the realities of young people. Also, community monitoring reports on service delivery in important essential areas such as education, health, and employment. But also, of course, they also produce policy briefs and shoulder reports to international processes such as the AU Agenda 2063, UN and SDGs, etc. But also, young people are very innovative people. Also, they're in the digital space where they produce data through platforms such as tracking corruption, gender-based violence, and youth employment, etc. That's the kind of evidence or research that most of these youth-based organizations we consulted, they are producing. You could see how critical this evidence is. But then we're interested to understand exactly why is it not taken seriously and why is it not formally integrated in policy-making processes. What could be the matter here? So we found out actually there are some barriers, but the first one I think is legitimacy issues, where evidence from youth-led organizations is often perceived as less rigorous or maybe activist-driven compared to the data from established think tanks or government bodies that produce research themselves. But also there's the issue of institutional barriers where policy-making systems remain hierarchical with limited formal mechanisms to integrate youth-produced knowledge into planning and evaluation cycles, which is concerning. And another one which stood out, of course, is the issue of resource constraints. So many of these youth organizations lack the resources to package their data into formats policymakers consider credible. So, for example, like things like your monitoring reports, evaluation frameworks, etc. And the last one, which is problematic for me, is the issue of power and politics, which yesterday there's a colleague of mine here spoke about that, and I think his youth as well, and I was smiling when he raised this issue because it's affect most of young people in Africa. It's where these established institutions and donors, they dominate the evidence base, leaving youth evidence marginalized themselves. And some, funny enough, they pretend like they're working with us, young people, but we know that they're just using us. We are aware. But then that's just the issue of power and dynamics. When you don't have resources and stuff, like we tend to fall into these traps. So, but then I'm not here to complain because as young people, also they regard us as people who are complaining. But I'm here to tell the reality of what is happening when we produce evidence and is not being used. And I'm not threatening anyone, but I'm telling you that that's where young people will take it to the street, because if the formal process itself is not being formally recognized, normally they will take it to the street. And now the government and other guys, they don't have a choice but to listen the hard way. So let me give you solutions so that we can avoid that. I think we need to move beyond tokenism. Young people do not like tokenism. We can see tokenism from a distance because like we've been through the process for some years now, to a point where when the government stood up and talked, like we just don't take them serious anymore. So I would say that shift from symbolic inclusion to structured participation, where youth representatives must sit in the room but contribute evidence that is reviewed, debated, and formally integrated into the policy cycle. We must be proud. We must see it when we see a certain policy in the public and say, this is where youth came in, and not to question, to say, who really did these things on our behalf as young people? We get so frustrated. But then we should have institutional mechanisms where we support youth organizations. We've got quite a lot of them. We did a mapping actually in each country. Like there's a lot of youth-based mechanisms. Youth people, they really care about this continent. They care about their countries to a point where they organize themselves formally. They don't just wake up and decide to take it on the street. They organize themselves formally and see how can we work with government and how can we assist our government into making decisions that are evidence-based. So now, we must meet them halfway to a point where we support them and also we pair them with those established think tanks or universities for co-production or knowledge while maintaining the ownership of their perspective. The thing about, it's good to work with the think tanks. I don't want to undermine them. I'm the product of that. But the thing is that when you take credit for our work, that's where I don't agree with you, because you must maintain the credibility of that this research is from young people themselves, and they produce it themselves, and they let the process themselves. But also create some feedback loops and accountability, where policymakers should commit to responding to youth-generated evidence, and not just reviewing it, but this could include formal reports outlining which youth recommendations were accepted, adapted, or rejected, with clear reasons, so that we are certain about that. But the last one is to recognizing diverse evidence forms. Of course, you must value the non-traditional forms of evidence. Some of the youth, they produce evidence from digital spaces, such as social media, and then also, of course, other citizen-generated reports. That evidence themselves also must be considered as evidence that is legitimate and evidence that can shape or influence some of our policies. Also, institutionalize the processes of governments and international organizations to treat this as a complementary to official data sources. So now, the question here is not that evidence, is not that youth or young people do not produce evidence, or they do, but the question is that, do policymakers take this as a legitimate evidence or not? And I'm gonna leave with that question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those contributions as well. Unfortunately, because of time, I won't be able to give you the time to discuss with your friend, but I'm hoping you can do that during the break. So please keep some of the discussions that we've had here today, and maybe please have those discussions as we break. Think about how in your space, after the tea break, we will have 5 sessions, unlike usually we would have 4, right? So the first session that we have will be in this room, and that one is the Upnote panel. So it will be in this room, the plenary, and we do have French translation for this room, right? And then the second one will be the discussion with the AILA winners from 2024, right? So I would encourage young people to attend that session, because then you get to hear about career progression of those who have won the award and get some advice from them. So that session is happening at CIDRE. So you are pressing M on the elevator, right? And then you are turning on your left. So this is the elevator, right? And then CIDRE is on your left, this side. And then the other session that's taking place is the working session, which is aimed at validating results from multiple countries. And that one will be taking place in Oregon. Just to also say, CIDRE also does have a translation as well. So if you are going to the session with the AILA winners, there's translation there as well. But we also have the working session, which is focused on validating findings from West Africa. So that one will be in Oregon. So same place, you press M, you go up, but this one is on your right. That room does not have translation. Right, and then we still have the Innovation Hub, which is in the glass door when you go out. And in the Innovation Hub, we are showing 4 very nice innovations. One that I would like to highlight is that there are people that actually drove from Ghana to Benin. They took a road trip to get here. While some of you are flying, they took a road trip, and I think you want to hear about how that went. So one of the innovations that will be taking place would be that road trip. So that's the Innovation Hub, which is that site. A new addition, a new room that we have is that we have training that is focused on the DEP platform. The training, you press M, you go up, it's at Cassia. So this Cassia is right next door to Cidre, right? So that's the training that is focused on DEP. It's very nice, it's planned to be very interactive. So those are the 5 sessions that we're gonna have after our lunch. Tea break. Tea break is 15 minutes, right? And then after that, we will give you a couple of minutes for you guys to come back here. So after the breakout rooms, when the sessions are done, you come back to the plenary, right? And we have our closing. After our closing, then we have the lunch, and those who made it are going to the tour. I hope that was clear. I tried to be as slow as I can, right? So if you have any questions, I'll try stand here and answer any questions, but we have those 5 sessions, and all sessions are happening before lunch. After lunch, we are doing the social activity. Can you please give the panelists a round of applause, please, as they go down. A reminder to please leave your headsets on the chair as you go for the tea break, which is that side. The tea break is that side. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Not too bad.
Thank you so much. Yes, yes, yes.
We only have 15 minutes before the breakout sessions. Please remember to leave your headsets on your chairs. La pause café ne va durer que 15 minutes. Il en reste 11. Merci de laisser vos casques sur vos chaises, s'il vous plaît. Merci.